William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show of a very special guest, returning guest. Her name's Courtenay Turner. She spells her name, first name Courtenay, last name Turner. And today we're going to talk about somebody who came up in social media. Her name is Charlotte Iserbyt. And if you're watching this on Rumble, Rockfin, or X, you'll see the cover of her book, very influential book, The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America, Charlotte Thompson Iserbyt. I've talked about her with John Klychek, who knew her and was, I think he had access to her archives of all things, which is really cool.
Yeah.
But Courtenay knows a lot about her. This is not Courtenay and I's first show. We've done other shows, I think going back to 2022 of all places. We've done two shows this year. I've done shows on, let's see, we did Want to Play a Game and Get Played, A and B. I did that. We've done Tavistock Institute, Pilgrim Society, Templars, and then in 2022 was Exposing Balenciaga. But yeah, this is an important topic. A lot of things are happening in the world right now. I've been busy just kind of trying to keep up with what's going on in the Middle East, which is very pregnant with meaning. There's no question about it, but this is a show I think is important as well. So, Courtenay Turner, welcome back to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
So for people who hadn't heard our earlier shows, maybe you could do a little bit of background and kind of what led up to your interest and research into Charlotte Iserbyt.
Yeah. So for those who aren't familiar with my story, I started going down all these rabbit holes back in 2020. I was living out in Santa Monica, California, and as you all know, everything was shut down. Everybody's faces was covered, and I'm hearing impaired. I actually learned how to speak by reading lips. So I didn't get hearing aids till I was almost 6 years old. And when I realized, when everybody's faces were covered and I found myself in the midst of, 2020, I didn't realize how much I had depended on the nonverbal communication until all the coping mechanisms I had spent my life developing were then stripped from me. So I had people who were suggesting that I should start a podcast. This is kind of like the short version of the story. And I didn't really know what podcasts were. I hadn't listened to podcasts. The joke that I made is somebody was telling me that when they heard my birth story, my life story, like, you need to be on Rogan. And I was like, what's a Rogan? Why do I need to be on it? That's how little I knew about the podcasting world. So, but then it dawned, I started listening to podcasts, and through that, and it became a way to, at least hear people. I get the way people used to feel when you'd watch TV and you'd watch a sitcom and they felt like, it was friends in your living room. And that's kind of how I felt through the podcast. I would listen to these conversations, and it was very, very helpful for me getting through a really, really dark time. And then it dawned on me that I could possibly, save myself by just recording conversations and having, meaningful discourse, even if it was through a digital interface, that I would be able to see people's faces, and naked face conversation just might save my life. So I really didn't think I would necessarily start a podcast, but I made a commitment to myself to record for 6 months. And I told people that I might not air them, but that I really wanted to have this opportunity to be able to see people's faces and have conversations. So long story, not so short, that's kind of how I fell into all of this. And through a lot of the research, one of the things that was coming up locally was this school choice issue. And school choice was something I was very passionate about. When I was actually 12 years old, I had started a board for school choice. I lived in a very, very small town, and we didn't have a high school. Public high school. So the only high school that I could go to, a public high school, would have been the neighboring town. And it was not a very good school. It was not in a safe neighborhood. And most of my friends were going to neighboring town schools that were actually in closer proximity to me. So in terms of mileage, they were actually closer in distance. And I, being 12 years old, was very confused. I didn't understand why my parents didn't have the choice to send me to one of those schools. And especially since it would be a better education, I get to be with my friends, so that made sense to me. So I put together this board for voucher systems essentially for school choice. And I didn't know the long range agenda back then, but this topic was coming up and locally where they were aggressively pushing the school choice. And I started doing some research and realized this agenda goes, all the way back. Charlotte Iserbyt was one of the people blowing the whistle on it. But, it really goes back to the late 1800s with this, importation of the Prussian model of education right after the Battle of Jena in 1807, where they lost the battle and they decided that they must have lost the battle because these soldiers rebelled because they were critical thinkers. And we can't have that. We need an education system that breeds for compliance and obedience so that we have mindless, obedient soldiers. And this is really what we're seeing now is the result of that education system being exported to the United States. And so through this research, I realized how aggressively they were pushing it, even locally, and wanted to understand why. Why are they so adamant about, and it looked like they were doing it through really corrupt means. There were PACs that were being funneling money into, supposedly conservative, I put that in air quotes, organizations, things like Americans for Prosperity. I call them Americans for Propaganda. But, whatever makes sense to you. But, so we had these people who claimed to be conservatives and they're advocating for school choice, but a lot of like Koch Foundation money. AFP is actually part of a larger consortium called the Atlas Network, which is linked to the Mont Pelerin Society.
Which you've mentioned in the past, right?
Yes, was
coming up.
Born out of the Walter Lippmann colloquium. And I actually just recently wrote an article on the Kantian problem of libertarianism. As a lot of people don't realize that it really actually its roots are not realist, in terms metaphysically speaking, philosophically speaking, but they're an outfit that is trying to infiltrate. So I don't even think they're authentic to the libertarian movement itself. They're really just, they've effectively become a controlled opposition. A lot of these organizations that are part of this larger consortium. So we've got the Atlas Network that has hundreds of organizations, one of them being AFP, and then this Mont Pelerin Society, and there's a lot of overlap between the two. For instance, like the Heritage Foundation, which of course is very involved in education. There's a huge part of Project 2025, which is the Heritage Foundation platform. And unfortunately, as much as Trump did denounce it and say, separated himself from it, kept saying he has nothing to do with it, didn't know anything about it. It kind of looks like that's what's being implemented. So I don't know. That's not voting.
It's all over his administration, and they're all like Knights of Malta too. So
yeah. So as you mentioned, John Kleisik, he's a dear friend of mine. We actually interviewed Constance Cumbey together, and he's up there right now. He said that he brought home a little memorandum pamphlet for my husband and I. And he said that she had mentioned us before she passed, but he said that Charlotte told him that all presidents have to swear on the Heritage Foundation before they're sworn in on their platform. And I know there's a lot of discussion. So I made this joke, and I mean, I really do mean it as a joke, so don't take it too literally. But I know there was a lot of conversation about how Trump didn't put his hand on the Bible. And I'm like, maybe he had to put it on the Project 2025. And I do mean it as a joke, but
it wouldn't surprise me. There was kind of a kerfluffle about the reading of his formal kind of presidential oath. Like the Roberts didn't wait long enough for Melania to step forward. I don't know if you saw that, but it didn't have a proper decorum, it seems like.
It was definitely something. Yeah, exactly. It didn't have proper decorum. That's a great way to put it. I can't speak to the facts on the ground. I don't know what actually happened, but I would agree, just as an outsider observing it, it did lack the proper decorum. And
you mentioned Constance Cumbey. For people who don't know, I mean, this is really an interesting connection between you and Kleisik and Iserbyt and Cumbey, because these are two women who really, maybe Judith Reisman was like that too, kind of like dissidents. I don't like that word dissident very much, but people who whistleblower. Yeah, I think that's better.
They were totally whistleblowers. And actually, coming on, I reached out to John just to see if he was available. Because like I'd be remiss if I didn't, And I said I would ask you, but he wasn't. But he said if we want to do a part 2, we could totally do something, the three of us.
I thought the same thing. I should have reached out to him. I've just been busy juggling all kinds of stuff. So
I totally understand. He's actually
kudos to John. We're not trying to step on your territory.
No,
You've done terrific work. Check out Clyde Check's interviews in my catalog. I think it's KLYCZEK.
And the proper pronunciation, I think, is Klychek, but he does often say Klysek. So
okay.
Kudos to you. I think you got it much more accurately than I did. But
Constance Cumbey.
Constance Cumbey. So she was the whistleblower on the New Age movement. And her story is fascinating. She was a brilliant, brilliant woman. She wrote The Hidden Dangers of the Rainbow. I just did a show because I actually have this whole show planned for this weekend. It's going to be my last radio hour, unfortunately, at least for a while, until I can afford to revive it. It's, not free to do. And these things often get very expensive. So I am going to be pausing it for a bit. But for my last one, I've been working on this article right now. I think it's 12,000 words on the Delphi method. So it kind of ties both of them. It ties Iserbyt and Cumbey together. And I think there's a lot of overlap between both of the work that they did. But they were really heroes, in my opinion. There's that saying, national treasures. And I think that definitely applies to these two women. But Constance Cumbey she had met somebody who was, very into the New Age movement. So she started exploring it really just out of curiosity. And I did this tribute last night where we had a clip from the episode that John Klysek and I did together. We had the honor of actually going to her house. She has this incredible library. I mean, tens of thousands of books, full volumes of like Alice Bailey and, all of these esoteric volumes of work. And so we went over there. We did an interview in person. We got to spend a few days with her. I think she thought we were recording the whole time. And I kind of wish we were because she is really a wealth of knowledge. But she was a lawyer and she was investigating for her own curiosity. And she realized that this love and light movement was actually a very dark Luciferian deception and that they were plotting to create a one world religion. And that, of course, it was a plan for world domination. This is tied to the UN, UNESCO, all these wonderful NGOs, the whole green movement, the sustainable development goals. Of course, today is the 17th. They were obsessed with the number 17. I think it's because I have a book that I'm working on currently. I put a little preview of my book out on my Substack for my Substack subscribers, but it's called Hegel's Dialectic, a Gnostic Jacob's Ladder, and a Machinery of Control. But I have a section in there on the Pythagoreans. Most people are familiar with Pythagorean theorem. We learned that in geometry class. And he was an ancient philosopher, ancient Greek philosopher, but he was kind of like a cult leader. He was a musician as well, right? And
the Amorc people love Pythagoras. The ancient mysterious order of Rosicrucians have him as like one of their big leaders. He could be in two places at one time. And he really is kind of a new age kind of hero. You see him pop up in certain places.
Totally. Yeah. And he was a lot of his mathematical discoveries came from music because he was a musician. And I think of him as like, it's these 1,000 years ago, but thousands of years ago, but it's kind of like today, the equivalent of today's like rock star. He was very much a guru. And I brought him up just because the number 17, right? That there's the Theodorus spiral and it eclipses at 17. So in my book, I talk about how that's on the spiral, that's Aufheben rung as you move up the Gnostic Jacob's ladder. But so she was blowing the whistle on this movement and how I opened this episode that I did recently with the very beginning. She talks about the rainbow. And of course, the rainbow is, a biblical icon, right? Reference to Noah's Ark. But that
God will never flood the earth again, right? That's the sign of the rainbow for humanity.
That's right. And so for the New Agers, it's all about this bridge between the people and Shambhala. and they call it Anthakarana. I believe that's how you pronounce it.
Anti-corona, right? Which is on the Operation Warp Speed, by the way, the symbol of the anti-corona.
Is it really?
Yeah, I'll bring it up. It'll blow your mind.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Well, that's creepy.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I think Trump has a lot of ties to, we've talked about, I've talked about Game B with you. And I think there's very much a dialectical movement between Game B and the Dark Enlightenment. I think of the Game B as kind of like the Hegelian left-hand path, and the Dark Enlightenment is kind of operating through the quote-unquote right-hand path. That's not to say that they're necessarily left, right politically. It's just that's what they're operating through, and they're using those archetypes, right? The patriarchal kind of authoritarian. They're trying to create an autocracy through the Sov Corp. That's the Dark Enlightenment movement. And then you've got the Game B, which is they're both pushing towards a technocracy, but Game B is much more theosophical, divine mother, spiritualist type of a movement. But I think
that box, just to sorry to interrupt you, but that
Yeah.
box is the anti-corona behind the corona there. So that three-dimensional thing, like it looks like a three-part kind of a swastika with missing an arm or something. But it's also a tesseract too. It's like a box within a box. I think it could be interpreted that way, but yeah, that's called the anti-corona. Sorry, yeah. Wow.
There's so much symbolism in that. Wow, I'm gonna have to spend a little time.
Yeah, pretty wild. I didn't know. I didn't make that connection between Cumbey, Hidden Danger, the Rainbow, and the anti-corona until now. Like that's in there, but
yeah, she outlines. It's actually like before her book even begins. She says the rainbow. Although the rainbow seems to be the only colored arc of light refracted through the raindrop, both Christians and New Agers, it has a deep meaning. To both Christians and New Agers, it has a deep meaning. According to the Bible, the rainbow is a symbolic of God's everlasting covenant that he would never again destroy the earth by flood. However, the New Age movement uses rainbows to signify their building of the Rainbow Bridge, Antakarana, between man and Lucifer. But it is Shambhala. They talk about Shambhala as the will of God, and it's supposedly Shambhala is in the Gobi Desert. But who they say is the oversoul. New Agers place small rainbow decals on their automobile and bookstones as a signal to others in the movement. Some people, of course, use the rainbow as decoration, unaware of the growing popular acceptance of its occult meaning and the hidden dangers. And she wrote this, it was published in 1983. And I think that's really interesting, the timing, because she actually knew Marilyn Ferguson. Marilyn Ferguson published the Aquarian Conspiracy.
Wow.
That she was the assistant to Willis Harman. And so it was really a pseudonym, and that the Aquarian Conspiracy was published in order to popularize the ideas that were in the Changing Images of Man study. Changing Images Man.
That blows my mind. I grew up in Northern California. They had a school called Harman Turman, and these other guys who were all kind of in the early New Age eugenics movements. They're all
spiritual eugenics.
Yeah, and they all got scraped off. Now they're all named differently. But this is interesting, too. This is Kenneth Anger. That's what made me think of the rainbow to Lucifer. This is kind of one of his famous insignias, like a total warlock attached to Manson, Page, so many people, even in the modern world. But this is like his famous jacket, the rainbow to Lucifer.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
So people don't know that when they see that rainbow flag, guys, that's Lucifer, guys. So it's a Lucifer. People think I'm like joking with you. It's not. That is Lucifer. Yeah.
Yeah, that's their meaning of it. But I keep saying we can't cede all of these symbols. We need to reclaim it. The rainbow's God's symbol. It does not belong to them. We should reclaim it. I've gotten a lot of pushback because you can see a lot of purple, like my microphone is purple, and they've kind of co-opted purple, right? It's the royalty, it's the synthesis, and they have all sorts of semiotics related to the meaning behind purple, but it's my favorite color, and I'm sick of giving them everything. So
you got to take it back. It's transgressive. That's what all this stuff is. Yeah.
So yeah, so that is, so they do, that is what the rainbow symbolizes for them, and that is what she was really trying to expose. And it's interesting that there is so much overlap, because Iserbyt, of course, it was in through the education system, but really what she was uncovering was the same kind of plan. It's all spiritual. It's all a religious plan to create a one world religion that will usher us into this one world governance system. And of course, that will result in a noosphere that will push us into the technological singularity. It's all tied.
It's hard to believe. It's unbelievable.
It sounds so crazy. It does sound so crazy. But she outlined, so I guess we can start with Constance Cumbey. I had read through some of the parallels that she outlines between Alice Bailey. So Alice Bailey, for those who are not familiar, she was a Theosophist, right? She was a disciple of Madame Blavatsky, who was one of the founders of Theosophical Society in 1875, along with people like Quan Judge and Henry Steele Alcott. And she was a disciple, and she kind of splintered off. And she was, interestingly enough, she was also a co-Freemason. And so was Madame Blavatsky, and so was Annie Besant, who was also another Theosophist. And Annie Besant was also one of the founders of the Malthusian League. So you get the idea of where these people are. She was also a member of the Fabian Society. We've talked a bit about that on previous shows. And so Alice Bailey she was married to Foster Bailey, who is a high-level Freemason as well. And she did talk, the Freemasonry component is significant, because she talks about how she thought that the Freemasonry infrastructure was going to be instrumental in creating the universal brotherhood. So creating this one world religion. And I've got quotes. I've done a whole thread on my Twitter, X, whatever we call it these days, outlining and with screenshots from Alice Bailey. That's not to say that every member of, a secret society or Freemasonry is somehow inherently evil or in on the grand plan, but this is coming from her. That's her words. And she created Lucius Trust. It was originally called Lucifer Publishing. That was in 1922. And there was some, kind of questioning from some Christian groups. Why are we creating a Lucifer Publishing? Much like Madame Blavatsky had Lucifer Magazine. And so she changed the name to Lucius Trust. And they, under Lucius Trust, is a couple of other organizations like World Goodwill. World Goodwill, who Lucius Trust operates through, actually has direct consultancy status with the UN. And so they have and you can see it right on the website. So that means they have a seat on the board. It means and Lucius Trust is also the publishing company for the UN. So this is when people say, oh, but there's so many organizations, they have no influence. Like, what does it matter? They tell you right on their website. I mean, they have direct consultancy status. They're part of the, Economic, Social Council. I forgot what the acronym is, but they're directly a part of that for the UN. So they're very connected. They do have a significant voice in the UN. She also created the Arcane School. This is where you can become initiated in the esoteric teachings. And then she has the triangles, of course, which is, where they meditate and they do the prayers. And this is very instrumental for things like World Invocation Day. And I recently did an episode on this as well. And I published a pretty lengthy article on the Centennial Conclave. So Alice Bailey predicted, she said, every quarter of a century since 1425, which I think is a very significant year, because that was the Renaissance. We've got, all these Hermetic philosophers and thinkers who come to the forefront, and during that time in the 1400s. But she said it starts then. That was the first Centennial Conclave. And then we have 2025 is going to be when we have this externalization of the hierarchy. And of course, she wrote the book. You can go right to Lucius Trust website and see it. She has it right up on there, or the UN has it right up on there.
I've done a show on it with John Brisson.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so. Awesome. So the Centennial Conclave, she predicts, is this year. World Invocation Day was June 11th, and that is when they do these prayers for World Invocation Day. So triangles and the World Goodwill servers all get together and meditate. But in Constance Cumbey's book, she goes through the parallels between the Nazi movement and Alice Bailey's writings. And she basically says that the New Age movement is the Fourth Reich, that's what they're trying to usher in. And I had read it in my episode that I just released with Constance Cumbey, as a tribute to Constance Cumbey with the clip from her. And I read a couple of these passages, and it's uncanny. I mean, really, the mindset is so similar between Hitler. And Hitler did have a copy of the Secret Doctrine on his nightstand. So, he was definitely...
The Nazi Party is Alice Bailey. It is the New Age. I mean, it gets really crazy. Like, I have to verify this, but apparently Hitler, I don't know if I talked that with you or Brisson, but Hitler had, when he was in the mental institution, he had a visitation by one of the ascended masters. You ever hear that story?
I have heard that.
Yeah.
I haven't gone and verified.
I have to verify that too.
But I have heard that. I would believe it.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you look at her 7 root races and the Aryans and all that stuff, that's all coming out.
I actually I put up the whole, a quote from her on the root races, and that it got taken down.
Wow. Yeah. It's probably too much truth. Yeah.
Too much truth. Yeah. We can't go quite that far, And
that the whole concept of like getting rid of people and these, subhumans, that's also Alice Bailey. Like all these concepts
Blavatsky.
And Blavatsky, so
they talk about it really is spiritual eugenics. Yeah. But I guess I won't read all of these, but you can see in her book she has like this huge chart where she goes through New Age thought and Nazis, and it's like parallels. So she was a true hero. She also had her book A Planned Deception, and this was based on what she discovered about Benjamin Creme, talking about the reappearance of Christ. And so this is a stage of the New Age Messiah, which of course is really, they call it Lord Maitreya. They call it the Christ. This is not Jesus Christ. That's not what they're referencing. It's the Antichrist. And they say it's a world teacher, like a, Buddha or Krishna, no different. And she explained how, they're using this deceptive language, but they're really talking about Lucifer. They're talking about the Antichrist. So,
right, the symbol is Prometheus, right? So that's what Blavatsky used. That's why you see this huge Prometheus, golden Prometheus, in all these things in Manhattan at the Rockefeller Center. It's like gilded. So the Rockefellers are neck deep in Luciferianism and the UN. And the World Trade Center. So.
Yes, all of these NGOs and who are trying to usher in a one world religion, and it is religious, and they're trying to use that in order to create this one world government. And then of course we have the Gaia religion that comes out of that. That comes out of this, New Age type of religion, which I'm not new. This goes all the way back. I would say it's just a rebranding of the ancient mystery schools and religions, and Neoplatonism. They drew very heavily from Neoplatonism. And Blavatsky herself says that she was very inspired by Plotinus and the Neoplatonists, the concept of the oneness, right? That we're all, we come from source, and it is our journey to return back to source. So it is really interesting, the overlap with Iserbyt, because Iserbyt's, of course, uncovering. She was working, for the Department of Education under the Reagan administration. And she blew the whistle on the BEST project, the Better Education Through Technology, which has really gone on steroids today, with them teaching them through computers and AI interfaces. But the education system, the World Core Curriculum that Robert Mueller was trying to implement. He was Secretary General of the UN for 4 decades, and he said it was predicated on the works of Alice Bailey. Alice Bailey wrote the book Education in the New Age, and in his, I believe it was 2,000 ideas, or it became 4 or 7,000, who knows. He apparently fancied himself quite the visionary, and so he couldn't really stop and kept writing these ideas. But he keeps talking about planetics, right, which is this planetary system of governance and education and religion and, really just a planetary control system. But he talks about how it's all based on the works of Alice Bailey. And so the World Core curriculum that has become Common Core in the United States, or as Charlotte Iserbyt likes to say, Communist Core, which I think is more aptly put. But she was really quite a whistleblower, because she blew the whistle on this BEST project, which did get her fired, actually.
Oh, wow.
Yep, she got fired for blowing the whistle on that. But she also brought, I really encourage people to get the book, just so, I know you had it up on the screen, but just so people can see how thick this book is. And she has all the receipts. I mean, there's like full documents in here, quotes from the documents, and the bibliography alone is worth getting the book. And I recommend people get the full, because there is an abridged version. I recommend you get, like, the appendix is a few hundred pages long. So
it's interesting because she bounces between communism and Nazism. So she sees similarities in the application of some of their doctrines to modern American education. So some people may think she's just focusing on Nazis. No, it's much more broad. It's really authoritarian systems, I think.
Yeah, well, actually, what she discovered, and she was very instrumental in working with Anthony Sutton. So she, her father and her grandfather.
I didn't know she was that connected. Yeah, wow.
Yeah, her father and her grandfather were both members of Skull and Bones, and she gave Sutton basically the Rolodex for Skull and Bones, because she had access to it. And so, yeah, they were working together on research, because there was, she blew the whistle on this too, was that there was a plan the whole purpose of what the education system they were trying to create was to create like an Ameris. And this is actually, there's a whole article in the Whole Earth magazine on this, Stuart Brand's Whole Earth magazine. Remember when I talked about Game B and how they, on their wiki, they say, we are gods, we better get good at it. That's what he opened his Whole Earth magazine. And there's a whole section on this Ameris project, which is what the Carnegie Endowment Foundation was saying. They were going to create this hybrid, of America and Soviet Union. And Reagan actually signed an agreement with Gorbachev to merge the two education systems. And this goes all the way back to and it was in order to create a planned economy, right? And so we can shift us out of a free market type of economy into a planned economy. And actually, it's really fascinating, because she talks about this, I'm going to blank on his name, like Gardabini. What was his name? I'll get it right.
She mentions a lot of figures like in the kind of 20th century culture. She talks about Lewis, Skinner, Kinsey, Alger Hiss.
Yeah.
So it's like they're integrated in there. So her breadth is really remarkable, I think, in a lot of ways.
It is. So his name is Garbarino, and he wrote this book. What was the original name of the book? I'm going to find it just so in case. It was originally called If It Really Mattered. And then the new title was Towards a Sustainable Society, an Economic, Social, and Environmental Agenda for Our Children's Future, by James Garbarino. And what I found so interesting that, I just thought of, because I was talking about the economy, this was all about the new religion, essentially the green utopia. And in it, he talks about a cashless economy. So she blew the whistle on that too. So she was really uncovering this, how they were going to merge this Soviet and United States education system. And the whole purpose is to create this planned economy so that, from womb to tomb, essentially, that we're going to be tracked. And every child is going to be taught by a computer with this Skinnerian, Pavlovian type of model, which really goes all the way back to Wilhelm Wundt, right? Which in this book, there's a whole section that Anthony Sutton has in the America's Secret Establishment, the Order of Skull and Bone. The middle section is all about how the order controls education. And he talks about how this goes all the way back to Wilhelm Wundt, and Charlotte Iserbyt talks about it too. She's in many videos discussing this and many writings as well in her book. But Wilhelm Wundt was a Hegelian philosopher, and he actually believed that human beings don't have a soul, and therefore we can program them neurologically, that it's all stimulus based. And this is downstream. We get Skinner and Pavlov and Dewey and Gilman and the look-see method, right, from Gallaudet, which was very useful for somebody who might be deaf or cognitively impaired. But for children, for mainstream children, it is regressive in teaching, not, helping them advance. So yeah,
and it also that worldview goes into MK Ultra, believe it or not. A lot of that behavioral research into turning people into robots or whatever, like they literally have that idea. Like, there's no soul, we can program them. Psycho-civilized man, whatever. So it all goes back.
Yeah, exactly. She talks a lot about Lewin. I can probably find that section too. But Kurt Lewin, of course, Kurt Lewin was he's got like the overlap between Tavistock, the Frankfurt School, right? That he was a Frankfurt School refugee, and he came here, I believe it was 1933, and he created the Institute for Social Research in Michigan. He also created the National Training Labs in 1947, and he had set up in Bethel, Maine, which was near where she was. And he's doing all these sensitivity training, right? Which is essentially brainwashing. There was actually a CIA document that you can download. It's a 1974, I believe it was. And they talk about how sensitivity training is essentially brainwashing. And they wanted to test it on their military, right? But that to discover the efficacy of sensitivity training, but that it was too similar to Chinese brainwashing tactics, and then they couldn't do that to their military.
Right, it's like a struggle session. It's another name for it. It's like a euphemism for it or something like that. I think they put Kaczynski through something like that. Murray did. Like it was some kind of like breakdown. Just made him feel terrible for years.
Or trauma bonding. That's essentially right. They do trauma circles, and that is essentially what it is. And it's also, I think, the Delphi method. And there's a lot of evidence that there is overlap between the sensitivity training, T groups, encounter group, and Delphi method techniques. But the Delphi methods is a more mechanistic variation of that. And this was the Rand Institute, Rand Corporation, who's in Santa Monica. I always thought their address was kind of interesting. It's 1776 Main Street. I lived right near there. Like it was like right outside my door. And I always saw that.
Where was it? In Santa Monica?
It's Santa Monica, 1776 Main Street.
What was the organization called again?
Rand.
Oh, yeah, I know where Rand is.
Yeah.
You know what's also by there, close to Rand, is the guy who does the primal scream therapy, Janos or something. He's literally like 4 blocks south of Rand.
Really?
Yeah, look up primal scream, which is kind of overlaps to me because you do it in a group and you're supposed to like release your traumas, and it was a thing in the 60s. Yeah, primal scream, Janos. His office is still there because I'm around in this area. I know the South Main area, not the one that's south of the 10.
I lived right there. Like
I
literally lived like border Venice and Santa Monica, right behind Main Street. Yeah.
Yeah, I know exactly that coffee shop that's right on the corner there.
Yeah.
What else is near there? Yeah, it's right at the beginning of La Brea, right? Right. Is that right?
The beginning of what?
La Brea in Maine. Is that right?
No, La Brea is further up, but yeah.
Can't remember that cross street then.
Yeah, and then this is like right. I was close to where Venice is, and this is the right It's kind of in between. This is the Rand is like right across the street from where a lot of the government offices are.
Pico. I'm getting it mixed up with Pico.
Yeah.
Maine and Pico. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah.
That coffee shop I go to all the time, Dogtown Coffee. I don't know if I'm
Yeah. Okay. I lived right there.
There you go. Yeah. I know exactly that area. So Small World Rand.
Yeah.
Research and development.
Delphi method, right? It was a means of creating group consensus for the military, and but it's very similar to the sensitivity training. It's just a more mechanistic. It's more of a like a quote unquote scientific. It's methodical. So you have you keep doing statistical analysis, and you supposedly have anonymity, and it's a whole formula, but it's basically sensitivity training done in a much more formulaic, whereas sensitivity training is more like group therapy kind of circles where it's essentially trauma bonding. I mean, I did a whole show specifically on sensitivity training, but Kurt Lewin, Kurt Lewin was quite the character. That was his field, and he was naval intelligence. The Navy actually, like naval intelligence, recruited him to do sensitivity training, and also MIT. But let me see if I can find, because she has a whole section on him in her book, which was actually really fascinating, and how they do use it for education. Yeah,
but it just shows a lot of this stuff was developed pre-World War II. Like they were doing all this is way before.
Well, she talks about that too. She talks about how in the Carnegie Endowment, they had a study that they did. It was conclusions and recommendations for social studies. She says it goes way beyond social studies. She always says she doesn't know why they called it, that. But in that, they talk about war. And they talk about how war is such a great tool for changing society and for changing the frame of people. And they actually called up Wilson to make sure he didn't end the war, because they didn't want to go back, because they were able to basically do Kurt Lewin's change, freeze, unfreeze, change, unfreeze, freeze, right? And they were able to do that, get people, just to disrupt people through war. And they didn't want them to go back to, in this document, they actually say they don't want them to go back to pre-war mindset.
Wow.
And this is in the Carnegie Endowment, Carnegie Foundation Endowment document, conclusions and recommendations for social studies. So she talks about that. I might be able to find that. Yeah, get control of the education in the United States to prevent a return to pre-war life. And they recruited the Rockefellers. So the Rockefellers would focus on the foreign education and foreign affairs, and the Carnegies were focused domestically on changing the education system here. And it was all about creating a planned economy. So it's all about creating workers, not thinkers. And they were very explicit about it. Like they openly say this. And she was blowing the whistle on all of this, really uncovering it from their own words. I mean, you hear these interviews with her, and she's reading their document. And she said that was one of the things about how she, when she was working for under the Reagan administration, that she had access to all of these, grant documents, and she could see all of their plans. And she said she was always missing because she was busy reading this stuff, and she would stay late, like she would stay there to read all of these documents and uncover what their big plans were. And it was horrifying. She got sent to a training, and I can't remember the name of the master teacher that she says, but she said they sent her for this training. It was like $100, and they paid for her to go. So she went, and it was all about recruiting change agents to change the education system.
Wow.
So they could change the values of the students. And so what she realized through this training that she went was that they were training her to find out and uncover who the resistors were. And so she says, essentially, they were training me to like find me. And she said that she went in and they were telling her how, we have to, it's all about the values. We need to change the values. And she said, well, don't we all have like whose values? Don't we all have the same values? And she's thinking the traditional like Judeo-Christian values. She's like, don't we all agree? Like, you don't lie, you don't steal, you don't kill, you don't hurt babies, like basic things. And she realized pretty quickly, no, that we don't. And it is a really important question. Whose values? And the values were all geared towards the sustainable development goals. That's what this is about. It's all about sustainable
Still there, yeah. So it goes all the way back. Like it's not the Great Reset. It's not King Charles III or King Charles III or something. It goes way back. Yeah.
It goes way back. Yeah.
Wow.
And it goes before Rio, actually. My friend Lisa just did an article on this, actually. My Lisa Logan, if you're familiar with her work, but she just did an article on the like precursor to Agenda 21 and their planning. So this goes all the way back, but it goes even before that, because this is religious, right? This is what Alice Bailey was talking about, and that's like back in 1920s, right? This is what the Fabian Society was a splinter group of the Fellowship for the New Life, which was a Theosophical organization, and they were a strange bunch. Like what was it? What was his name? I think was it Lovelock, but he was a sexologist who created this organization. And then it became a splinter group, was the Fabian Society in 1884. And then they decided they needed a specific group to focus on political matters. And that was the Labor Party in 1900. They created the Labor Party. Wow. But this is all like slow, gradual, incremental change, right? That's why the tortoise is their mascot, and the Hegelian dialectic is the wolf in sheep's clothing, and that's their coat of arms. So this is,
and there's a world. There's like a globe on an anvil. They're hammering it too. So it's like they had pretty ambitious goals. Like they wanted to change the world. Like wow.
Yeah.
Crazy. Yeah.
Well, yeah, they want to change the world, and the Fabians are very instrumental because they talk about social ethic. And this ties into what Iserbyt was really blowing the whistle on. This economic planning was to create an international economic world order. And if you look at some of the origins of the Fabian writings, it was people like Sidney Webb and Beatrice Webb, and they talk explicitly in their books about using the Soviet Union as a testing ground for the New World Order. They don't call it the New World Order, but for this economic planning, right? That's what they were testing, and then they were bringing it to the United States. And so that's the whole plan, is to create. And then she also talks about like regionalism, and this is part of the whole school choice agenda. So people think school choice means choice. It doesn't mean choice. You have a choice already. You have, I believe, a God-given right to educate your children as you see fit. But what they want is government choice. And so a government choice is not a choice. It's strings attached, right? Whatever the government funds, it runs. And this is what she was really like harping on. She was talking about how the whole agenda behind school choice was to create public-private partnerships. So this is, right? That's what
these
it's about.
words keep popping up. Yeah.
Public-private.
Sustainable, public-private. It's fascism, right? Isn't that what it is, or something? Yeah, crazy. So she was. When did Deliberate Dumbing Down of America get published? Do you know? One of the interesting things, maybe it has it on Amazon. One of the interesting things is like you research, you realize that these other kind of whistleblower researchers, they knew each other. So like it's not surprising to me that Cumbey and Iserbyt and Sutton all knew each other and overlapped with each other. And the same thing happened, like reading like some of these occult. Sanders and the guy who wrote Ultimate Evil, Terry, were friends. Like, but a lot of people don't know that, but they were like riffing off each other, sharing information, and they're both giants. To me, they're giants. Like incredible work.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sutton and Iserbyt worked very closely with each other.
Yes.
They were uncovering this whole Gorbachev and Reagan plan that they had signed, the Soviet planning of education, and they were calling it. It was going to be called like the it was like Ameri-Soviet. Yeah, it was 1999 was the first edition, and then there was another reprint in 2000, another one in 2001 of the deliberate dumbing down in America.
And for people who don't know, Constance Cumbey just passed away. She died June 9th, 2025. I don't know.
I realized it had been a year since we did that interview, and I was just about to reach out to her. And then, like I said, I was going to do this episode on the Delphi method. And then a friend of mine reached out and told me that she had passed away. And I thought, oh, I should do a tribute to her.
Yeah, it's worth it. I mean, this could be in part a little tribute, but she was 81, I think. I mean,
She was 81. Yeah.
81.
Yeah. She was she was definitely a force.
Yeah. Her books will still reverberate. People still talk about the hidden dangers of the rainbow. To this day, I reference it and talk about it. So she definitely, left her stamp on that, at least in those kind of those books for the future, for sure. Much like Iserbyt, much like these books. Sutton, too, for that matter. People are still referencing Sutton as a
he did
watermark. Yeah,
for sure.
They try to put him in this kind of like, box conspiracy theorist or alternate history, but it's all real, man. Wall Street and the Soviet Revolution. Yeah, it's all fact. It's really what it is almost. It's like a strange thing where I don't know the right term. There's another term, maybe we call it waking up, or, something like where you realize these things have deliberately been left out of our educations. By sinister forces, skull and bones, like literally some kind of guy from a death cult has decided you're only going to read certain things and treat you like literally maybe like a serf. Yeah, sheep. Yeah.
No, she talks about that. I want to read this because she shows like the changing of the definition of education. So she says, and it was in a really short period of time. So she says the New Century Dictionary of the English Language in 1927 says that education is the drawing out of a person's innate talents and abilities by imparting the knowledge of languages, scientific reasoning, history, literature, rhetoric, etc. The channels through which those abilities would flourish and serve. That sounds like a reasonable definition. Then we get to the Outline of Educational Psychology, Barnes & Noble, New York, 1934. So not even a full decade later. And the definition becomes, learning is the result of modifiability in the paths of neural conduction. Explanations of even such forms of learning as abstraction and generalization demand of the neuron's only growth, excitability, conductivity, and modifiability. The mind is the connection system of man, and learning is the process of connecting. This is why they, promote things like psychedelics, because it's that interconnectivity, and they claim it's making you smarter. We're not computers. There's a reason there's compartmentalization, and there's a reason why when you destroy all boundaries, people go insane and have mental illnesses.
Yeah, it's like schismogenesis or something.
Exactly. That's right. Yeah. That's exactly right. Schismogenesis. Which they want to create because those people are easier to control. The situation response formula is adequate to cover learning of any sort. And the really influential factors in learning are readiness of neurons, sequence in time, belongingness, and satisfying consequences. So, yeah.
Incredible. It's the mechanical man. That's all it is, You're just a bunch of neurons and there's no meaning. I mean, one of the interesting things, like rhetoric has been taken out almost of the lexicon, the American lexicon. It was a foundational form of study for all back in the Roman days. It was like math, rhetoric, and history or something like that. Like you'd read Pliny's Lives or something like that. But like rhetoric was a crucial component to the upbringing of Roman citizens. And then here it's gone. Like you can only find rhetoric classes in certain universities, and those are usually more challenging universities. You never find it in the state school.
It's
but it's so important.
they're not even teaching grammar these days, let alone rhetoric. Like,
It's so true. I mean, I think it's brutal because like the state system has become calcified into like it's something like Iserbyt, but also the Soviet elements there. You're just being hit with total ideology, and yet who's running this ideology should scare you. Like, what are these people teaching? Like, even in college.
oh yeah. Well, I think
It's
college is some of the
terrifying.
worst. Yeah, so I think that I found the section on Lewin, which is actually really interesting. So she says, who was Kurt Lewin? He was the very same Kurt Lewin who came to the United States in 1933. I did get that right. Founded the Research Center for Group Dynamics at MIT, which later moved to the University of Michigan. That's when it became the Institute for Social Research, and invented sensitivity training. Shortly before his death in 1947, he founded the National Training Laboratories, which was establishing its campus at Bethel, Maine, under the sponsorship of the National Education Association. It was directly under National Education Association. Their teachers were instructed in the techniques of sensitivity training and how to become effective change agents. And she discovered this because she went to the training on how to become a change agent. And after Lewin's death, his colleagues continued to develop his sensitivity training session, which became known as T groups, training groups. The T group became the basis for the encounter movement, right? The encounter movement with Esalen and, the group dynamics in the pop culture and in the corporate culture as well. In which participants get in touch with their feelings. Carl Rogers, one of the chief practitioners of the T group, considered sensitivity training to be perhaps the most significant social invention of this century. All of this spurred the development of humanist third force psychology by Rogers, Abraham Maslow, who wrote Politics 3, posthumously was published, and others, which had an enormous influence on the effective curriculum of public education. He started his career as a social psychologist in Berlin, where he organized a collective in which his students pursued experiments which Luria later recognized as highly effective. Some of Lewin's students were Russians who studied under him as early as 1920s and returned to the Soviet Union to teach and continue their research at the University of Moscow. In 1929, he attended the 9th International Congress of Psychologists at Yale. Yale is tied to Skull and Bones, right?
Right.
Who brought over this education system. According to Harvard psychologist Gordon Allport, his work was decisive in forcing some of American psychologists to revive their own theories of nature of intelligent behavior and learning. And then in 1932, Louis Terman, the head of psychology department at Stanford, invited Lewin to spend 6 months visiting as a visiting professor at Stanford. He'd been recommended by Edwin Boring, the director of the psych lab at Harvard, who had been greatly impressed with him at Yale. After the stint at Stanford, he decided to return to Germany via the Pacific and Trans-Siberian Railroad. In Moscow, he was able to confer with his fellow psychologists, including Luria, and Hitler had just come to power in August of 1933. And then he flew, right? He fled. He was a Frankfurt School refugee by way, and he was
Adorno, all those other characters. Wasn't Marcuse? All these characters, if I remember right now.
Exactly. Yeah, and then it goes on to talk about like how he favored the look-say method. This I was talking about Gallaudet, which was effective for students who were deaf or cognitively challenged, but not for the mainstream. And then he also had this whole theory. She talks about it here with like frustration and how children, when they're frustrated, actually regress. So they don't learn as
they
well.
Don't learn as much, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they probably get frustrated. It's deliberate frustration in a state school like that. You just have bells and ringers and boring, tedious work, and you should feel frustrated. Like most people, they don't know the system they're in. Like they've been
deliberately dumb them down.
They've been deliberately
just breed compliance. So now they're frustrated and they're not engaged. Yeah.
At 18, they're almost just the opposite of prepared for the modern world. It's if you go to I went to a state high school, and I mean, some of the stuff was good, but like they left out so much. Like there's just so many things. Like it's a shame. Anyway, we're at the hour mark.
Okay.
Tell
Yeah.
people what you've been working on. Tell them about your book, Substack, Twitter, all that stuff. Where can they reach you?
Too, before we close out, she also talked about the outcome-based education. And this is definitely an overlap because we've got William Spady and Shirley McCune, and they were New Agers. So we have that whole religious infiltration. It was all about outcome-based education, just very quickly. It's like performance-based versus like teaching critical thinking and how to think. It's, all about performance and compliance. So you see, again, the overlap between Cumbey's work and Iserbyt. But thank you so much.
Yeah. Let me ask you this question before we go.
Okay.
How many of those people who had straight A's, I wasn't one of them, but how many of them really got that because they complied? And that's always been a complaint of mine, or like a critique, is like, this guy's just regurgitating stuff. Is it really independent thought?
Well, I'll say two things to respond to that. So one, there was a girl, I was, I have a pretty good memory. So I usually do pretty well on, especially, when I was younger on like tests and stuff. But if I got 99, my dad would say, what happened to the other point? And then he would mention usually, and I don't mean this to be pejorative, they're really smart and they study really well, but like it would be a math test and he'd mention some Asian student in my class and be like, I bet they got 100. And my response would be, yes, but they don't know why shopping has two P's. Like, basically they memorize that it has two P's. That was my point, So, but here's the other thing is, what Robert Kiyosaki would always say that, A students work for C students, because C students were, they're out of the box thinkers and they're usually entrepreneurs and they're usually the CEO of the company. And the A student is very compliant and they're orderly and organized, will get the job done. They're good executors, but they're not the innovators. So that's my response to that. Yeah, I think that's.
I think you're right. So Charlotte Iserbyt and your book, mention where people get the podcast and all that stuff.
Yeah, so best place to find me is CourtenayTurner.com. So I spell my name a little bit differently. It's spelled like Courtenay. It is pronounced Courtenay, but it's CourtenayTurner.com. That's where you can find all of my podcasts and all the various ways you can support my work. And then I'm also on Substack. And so it's Courtenay Turner Substack. And I have been putting out quite a few articles. So if you are a paid subscriber to my Substack, you will get early access to all of my podcasts. And you will also get ad-free content because I don't have control over the ads in the other platforms, but if that's something you prefer, it's a great way you can support me and watch without ads. And I do have a book that I will be hopefully finishing within the next month or two, and it is on Hegel's dialectic. I call it Hegel's dialectic, a Gnostic Jacob's ladder, and a machinery of control. But if you want a little sneak peek preview, that is up on my Substack, so you can find it at Courtenay Turner's Substack. And that's
awesome. So your website is your full name, Courtenay Turner, Nay, and .com, and then Substack. So I'll put links to that. I think I have some other links I'll put it at the show notes. But again, we talked about Charlotte Iserbyt and Constance Cumbey and kind of this research into our new age education, which really, when you get through it and look back, for me, it's like haunting and like unnerving. Like, whoa, this is how bad it was. And so be careful out there, people. Check out Courtenay's work. Thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, stay there.